Thank you. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Erick Garcia. I'm a principal Android engineer, and I have been in the mobile space or in general IT for over 10 years. During my early career, more of freelancing. Eventually, I founded my own software development company. Uh, and Through that, assemble a small team to implement several projects. Eventually, that led to an opportunity to work in the United States, particularly in Atlanta, as part of a mobile consulting company, where I was basically the technical leader for the Android engineers, where they could come to me if they have any questions, and I will also be mentoring them on getting acquainted into um, joining clients in the US and the interview process, and also mentoring them on their projects. Afterwards, I have basically specialized on the medical space. I did a project for Dignity Health um, for the development of I led the development of two medical mobile applications, and my latest project has been with Kaiser Permanente, where I'm part of the um, core team, in which it specializes in the, let's say, base libraries that all the other features can use. And we also
Cool.
get heavily involved in the mobile architecture.
Awesome.
And yeah,
That's great. Cool. Thanks for that. So a couple of people just dropped in chat like, hey, we couldn't hear Ian at all. I realized this microphone was on transmitting to Erick, so Erick heard everything I was saying, but it wasn't actually going out on the broadcast. So I'll just do like a real quick re-intro. Welcome to the stream, everybody. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. If you happen to be hanging out on those platforms, you can certainly leave questions on both Facebook and LinkedIn. But if you want to come leave a comment that actually shows up on the stream over here in this panel, you will need to come over to Twitch. You can go to twitch.tv/IanDouglas736, and you can leave comments in there. Speaking of which, we already got our first question from someone in chat for Eric. How do you factor in security when doing Android development for a big company, specifically around HIPAA, it looks like? So I guess this is more of like a data security. Is that something that you're involved in, or how does that sort of factor in when you're looking into like Android and transmitting data around and things like that?
Yeah. So
Is that something you can talk about, or
there's certain aspects that I cannot, because of an NDA, cannot go deeper
right?
into. Do a high level overview, and I will not make it specific to a particular company, but more of the mobile medical space. So let's say that in general, as a developer or as a lead, there's going to be, particularly for medical projects, there's going to be a team particularly assigned to the security aspect, or a team that is responsible for a library that you can based on to do your operations. And we all get involved with the security aspect. It's not just the responsibility of a particular individual or a particular team, but there's some technical knowledge that is very critical, and you do have to have someone that is whose primary concern is to stay on top of it, because
Mm,
when it comes to security, it keeps changing. Now, I'm going to do an overview of the primary concerns. First of all, on at least on the mobile space, if you're storing any data on the database, local database of the device, you have to encrypt it, and that is
sure.
like a primary concern. There's many other applications or routing mechanisms on the device that might allow either a malicious application or another user to get access to the database. So being able to encrypt it is a primary concern, because even though Android works with a sandbox and regular users should not get access to um, the database that you store at the application level, there's ways to break through. So
Gotcha.
adding layers in between helps, and I can dig deeper into other aspects of the security. But let's say that first of all, when it comes to HIPAA, you have to be very aware of what are some of the uh, protected information that are, or of the member that are
Right.
covered under HIPAA. So
Yep.
you're not allowed to let's say share or display other than the member himself. You're not allowed to you have to protect, for example, their address, if they have any payment information,
Right.
um, and these kind of fields are, you have to like treat them separately. And you're not allowed, if you have any kind of analytics, you should not have any of that information in there. So those are considerations that you have to take at the architecture level to make sure that the security and privacy of your member is um, of the uttermost priority.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. And we typically call that like PII or personally identifiable information. Yeah, you definitely have to
Correct.
keep that stuff private for sure. And then Tech Dinosaur followed up, missed the intro. How to Ian and Eric know each other? Oh yeah, because my mic was muted. So Eric was actually running an interview preparation meetup for the Android development meetup in the Denver region, and was giving a talk about technical challenges. Like it was specific about tech challenges, and I just sat in because I love hearing other people's perspectives, and so yeah, I sat in for most of it. I actually had to leave early. I think I had a mock interview or something to do, or it was dinner time or something. So I couldn't stay for like the last little bit. But I'm like, I got to get this guy on my stream. So it was great that you were willing to hang out and give us some of your time tonight. So appreciate that. So yeah, RC Maniacs talk about like data at rest. Yeah, sometimes like I know with like SOC 2 compliance, if you really want to go down like security rabbit holes like SOC 2, you have to actually encrypt it at rest. You have to encrypt it on the disk, and then you also have to encrypt the data like in transit.
Mhm.
If the machine gets powered off, it's got to be encrypted, so that someone doesn't come and like literally physically take the hard drive and now they've got everything. So yeah, there's a lot of compliance rules and everything around that for sure.
Mhm.
Um, Zooey says
And
you
what I
can't have
would say, it's not just the responsibility of a team. There's also partners that specialize in that and do
right,
a code inspection and a system inspection. So it's not
right,
just the
right.
organization itself. There's also third parties that specialized in the security field that do an assessment of your current systems, and
That's
that's
right.
very
That's right.
important.
Yep. Very cool. And Zooey basically says in chat, you can't have enough information to figure out who the person is my understanding of HIPAA. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, so you'll pass like, identifiers and things around, but like you can't actually send like here's Ian and his address and his payment info and his blood type. Like you can't send all that stuff together. It's like here's this customer ID with this record ID and this record ID, and then you've got like multiple other lookups and things like that to actually go sort of like grab all that information and put it together, and then it's got to be encrypted, all the time. So
Right.
yeah,
And
good
also,
times.
there's a misconception sometimes, especially with the movies, that people will access the database directly, even like
Mhm.
developers, and that's completely untrue. We do not have access to anybody's data.
That's
Anything that
cool.
we use for testing or for development is going to be mock. It's going to be information that we created, and it's going to be a separate
Gotcha.
database. Like nobody has access to production data. On,
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. And folks that have hung out on my stream, they've heard all my stories about like dealing with production data and dropping like 150 million rows of production data one time. And yeah, I saw a really good tweet that I retweeted the other day. Is like a junior says like, "Oh no, I messed up production. I'm gonna get fired." Meanwhile, a senior dev's like, "Ah, I've had like three major outages named after me." So
Yeah, that's
yeah, good
why
times.
certain companies we have specifically separated into different databases. One
Right,
is for development, and one is from production. And nobody touches production,
for
it's
sure,
unless you
for
have
sure.
like a super amazing authorization. But no, nobody.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, let's kind of get back on the topic here. So, how did you get interested in helping people kind of get into like interview preparation and sort of uh, like start framing that talk that you did around interview prep and working through technical challenges? Like, what was sort of the like what got you interested in doing that and putting that sort of material together for people?
Yeah, let's say that since my early career, I had this passion for mobile or for development itself, and I wanted to share that knowledge. It's part of what I do. I basically do three things. I create, but also I learn, but also I share the knowledge. I teach, and I think with those three together, they have been the core of my activities and everything that I get involved in. And particularly, I have seen as of the past few years that there's a big shortage in talent, and I
Mm.
believe with education we can bring more people into the IT field. So I want to be one of the driving forces of um, growing this space.
That's awesome. That's really great, and that's something that I love doing too. I've actually been chatting with a handful of startups. One is called Speak, and they're based in, I believe, California, and then there's another group. Actually, no, they're based here in Colorado, I believe, and then another one called Year One with Crystal Garcia, and I've been chatting with both of them, and basically their whole missions as two different organizations are all around like diversity in tech and getting people trained up and teaching them how to get through interview processes and so on. So this group Speak, and their companies actually Speak underscore. And the idea that they have is like, we're going to teach you how to speak Amazon, or we're going to teach you how to speak Facebook, and they want to get, like interviewers from those companies to come and help them build curriculum specifically for underrepresented and marginalized groups to come in, learn that curriculum about how to get a job at that company. And then year one is basically like, how do we get you going into year one of your career? How do we get you that job? How do we work on training material to really set you up for success in that first year of your career? And both of those companies, I'm like, if you ever need help, like please reach out. I'm happy to like offer my perspectives and talk about mock interviews and all that kind of stuff. Like I'm more than happy to do that. I'm a big believer in diversity in tech. I'm a white dude in tech. I've worked around enough white dudes in tech. It's like, please, can I work around some other people that are not white dudes? That would be wonderful. Thank you. And folks on my stream know I've actually walked away from interview processes with companies over the last 2 months. I've been kind of finishing up my job hunt. Had some more offers come in today, so I'm pretty excited about that. But I've actually walked away from interviews where it's like, okay, your engineering team is entirely male. Like, why? Why is that? It's 2021, it's 2022. Like, why is it all male? Why is your company leadership like all white people? Like, where's the diversity? It's like, oh, we believe in diversity. I'm like, do you? Do you really? Because I don't see it on your team page. I don't see it, on your company page. Like, in demonstration, you're not showing me that you actually care about diversity. So saying it and doing it are two different things. And so, yeah, I actually gave some feedback to a couple of companies, and I'm like, I don't want to contribute to like an all male staff. Like, I'm happy to, you know, withdraw as a candidate, and hopefully you'll find some candidates that can like impress you with her or their skills, and not just fill it up with another white guy on your team. It's like, I don't want to be that. And I had one female recruiter reach back out, and she's like, "Hey, I really appreciate that you sent that message to my boss." I'm like, "You're welcome." I'm like, I hope it changes for you. Like, it's really all I can do. But
But I
um,
feel the same.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I feel like the entry barrier is quite high, and sometimes there's not the resources or interest to bring the diversity that is needed.
right,
Although now with the shortages, I think there's an to open the search space,
right.
and I have been also there's a few organizations that actually help, particularly for
Hey, Eric, we lost your video, and now I think we lost your audio. So I'm not sure if you're still there, but it looks like we've lost your connection. All right, he's reconnecting. All right, there he is. Let me copy this back over. All right, yeah, you're back. Yeah, we lost your audio, or we lost your video first, and then we lost your audio towards the end there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, no worries.
I don't think I have moved anything over here, but so I was saying that that on the positive side, there's several organizations that are trying to bring more diversity into the IT field.
Right.
There's Women Who Code, and
Yep.
I had someone on my network that collaborate with them directly into making their vision realize. And for the longest time, I have been trying to set some time aside to also mentor and collaborate on on that organization or a similar organization, because I also believe that we need the diversity. I
Mm-hmm.
think that some managers or some companies might have the traditional idea of separating males and females into males is like developers and female is more like creative or
Mm-hmm.
product. I think
Sales
we
or
are
marketing and so on.
or
Yeah,
sales and marketing, and I think we all are capable of everything, and I feel
absolutely.
with diversity we can complement each other's abilities or ideas, and I feel that the richest teams are the ones that have different backgrounds and
For
different
sure.
personalities.
Yeah, I appreciate that you said that. I'm right there with you on that. I think that's great. Zooey asked a question in chat. So Eric, do you actually do interviewing at your company, or have you done interviewing like on behalf of a company in your role?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And what I can say is that's the beauty of um, being able to diversify skills and experiences and working in different companies.
Hmm.
I have been, as I said, both as an interviewee or someone that is actively interviewing, and also as an interviewer. And also, I have the experience to be like in hackathons or also sharing a project and trying to get an investor um, to participate in the project, so I can talk all on all these areas. And if
Gotcha.
anyone has a particular question, I will be more than happy to go through it.
Yeah. Awesome. So Zooey actually dropped one in chat. It's a little long, so I'll kind of
Mhm.
share it. I did a two-part coding assessment recently. So Zooey is a boot camp grad looking for their first job. Just give you some
Mhm.
context there.
Mhm.
Um, I did a two-part coding assessment recently. I got the first one to pass, and the second one I ran out of time, but I put in as many notes as I could on how I would have finished, but I still got rejected before making it to the next round. Have you
Mhm.
ran into anyone when you interviewed them where they didn't do well, but you saw potential in them and you hired them anyway? What was that thing that sort of stood out to you?
Yes, actually. Um, back in um, My previous role in Atlanta for a mobile consulting company, we had engineers with all kinds of experience,
Hmm.
some more on the junior level and some more senior engineers. And there were a few that were struggling with particular topics or struggling with the coding exercise. Um, I know that, and the way I explain a coding type of interview is like a type of exercise that is going to be related to your daily work, but it's a completely different or it's a substantially different skill.
Mm.
Such as if you were to say the coding interview format when you have to solve two problems or coding problems in about 20 to 40 minutes, it's more akin to a 100-meter race, whether your daily development work is more going to be like a marathon. So you will require to do different things, and it doesn't matter if you have to take a little bit more time on one particular area, you can still catch up. And if you have a
Mm.
question, you will have, Google, books, um, other developers, your manager, to clarify the question or to help you move forward. Whether in the interview process you have that limited time, and sometimes because of the interviewer or the problem, or because you were nervous that day,
Mm.
you don't get to succeed or complete the exercise. I
Right.
personally, what I focus is um, more on the process that the person follows. On the I do value the technical knowledge. So if they can complement with, let's say that we're discussing about a topic, or I ask, hey, why did you do this line of code? Even if I see a syntax error or I see that there's an issue in there, if the person is able to explain, hey, I created this to be able to traverse the list or to print this statement or to have um, um, some data structure to store the elements in this way, I will see that as a positive instead of a negative. But I do see that most of the companies, one of their primary concerns is were you able to have some code, even if it's not optimal, that runs and performs the work that it was
Mm.
asked to do.
Yeah, that's good.
So as of lately, I have seen that tendency. But personally, when I interview, I also take into account other aspects, not just the exercise.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of done is better than perfect. Like getting any kind of answer is better than like not finishing. Like even
Mhm.
if you're writing really good code, if you don't finish, in my mind, I'm like, are you going to be a risky hire? Like, are we going to hit a deadline if I hire you? Versus like, okay, you can get it done. It's like ugly code, but
Mhm.
you're going to hit a deadline, no problem. And there's going to be time left over that we can like go back and optimize your code. But like, I always worry that if they're writing really nice code, but it's going to take too long and they don't finish, I'm
Mhm.
always I'm always going to have that nagging thing in my mind of like, are we going to hit a deadline if I hire you? And that's not something you want to sort of present. A handful of questions came in while you were speaking there. Question for Eric: what do you think is the hardest part of working on technical challenges in an interview besides being hella nervous? That's
Being
that's
able
that's
to,
definitely a real thing for sure.
yeah. So the main challenge, there's two main challenges, but the main one that a lot of people are not used to if they haven't practiced is being able to share your process out loud.
Hmm.
So uh, let's say that you're given the task of uh, going through an array of items or a list of items, and you need to multiply each, right? And you need to be able to, first of all, ask questions, right? Try to define the problem. Sometimes I have seen developers code an amazing solution, but for the wrong problem. So they don't get to what I was expecting, right? So making sure that you clearly identify what the problem is,
Mhm.
uh, what is the input of the program, and what is the output of the program or coding challenge. But also be able to, while you're coding, being able to explain why are you doing particular lines of code or what is the approach that you're following. And that's like the main issue, because when we're coding at home or at work, um, we barely speak unless we're a colleague and doing some peer coding. Like honestly, most of the
Mhm.
time it's just typing, right? So
Right.
being able to switch on the debugging mode is very important.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Good follow up and sort of segue, and it kind of circles back to the previous thing you were talking about, having that expectation of of communicating your process. Tech Dinosaur asks, what kind of process do you follow to work through a tech challenge? Or sorry, 3D Print Fan, is that expectation about their process different if they're a junior or senior? And then kind of the follow up from that, I think Erick just answered Tech Dinosaur's question of what sort of process do you follow to work through a tech challenge or several of them in a short amount of time. So yeah, I think Erick kind of talked about what that process is. But so as far as your expectation of like communication and what your process is, as well as like do they finish or not, how do you adjust that differently for like senior dev, intermediate dev, junior dev?
Mhm. Um, so, for example, the complexity of the problem that I will give a junior dev and a medium to senior dev is different. For a junior dev, I will focus more on basic data structures and some operations on those basic data structures. For a medium to senior dev, I will do more of an exercise where you have to work with a graph, or where you have to work with or you have to be able to divide and conquer, right? Where there's a problem that might require recursion, or where you might have to identify smaller pieces and then do some smaller solutions that integrate together into solving the problem, right? So that it requires deeper experience and more practice. But not only on the complexity of the problem, but also when it is a junior developer, I know that they might hit some type of, um, let's say, blocker or wall in doing the solution. So I don't see it. I don't. If they ask for help and they say, "Well, I don't remember this particular part of the syntax," or "There's this concept that I know, but I haven't been able to apply," I'm able to collaborate, right? And even if we collaborate and I give hints, I still see it as a positive signal. But with mid to senior engineers, I expect them to be more of the drivers of the interview, right? And be able to explain their knowledge and their process without too many hints, right? Because
Yeah.
with experience and years of experience, you get the skill to identify problems and come to with solutions, and also you tend to memorize critical aspects of the syntax. Not You don't need to know all the syntax, but most of the common stuff you're gonna have to face during the challenge. You should pretty much know it because they're
Yeah,
very common
I agree.
operations.
Yeah, for sure. Like knowing how to loop over like certain data structures and things like that. Like the more
Yeah.
advanced you are in your career, like the more it should just be like, oh yeah, I know what a hash is, I know what a list is, I know how to like iterate over those. So
But
awesome.
more importantly, the advantages of each data structure and disadvantages, and being
Right.
able to explain why did you pick a particular data structure.
Why did you choose one over the other? And the only way you can know that is if you know several, so that you can kind of weigh the pros and cons of like this one is more appropriate for this challenge than this one. Yeah, it's a great point. Shout out to Jen Develops. Thanks for the raid. Came in with 5 viewers, 7 viewers, somewhere in there. Appreciate y'all dropping by. How was your stream? How's the open source project going? It's good to have all you hanging out. Tonight we're just chatting with Erick. Erick and I, well, Erick was actually running a tech interview prep meetup for the Android developer group here in Denver. And I saw that come through like meetup.com. I'm like, I'm going to go hang out because I love hearing other people's perspectives and listen to Erick kind of talk about like here's how to walk through a tech challenge. I'm like, I gotta have this guy on my stream. So we're just chatting with him and hearing a little bit about kind of his current role in doing Android development. And we touched briefly on security and things like that, but bringing it back into like interview prep and things like that. So good to have you back on the stream. You got it all done. That's awesome. Got the wireframe done. Next will be prototyping in Figma. Very cool, very cool. So in their stream, they actually are part of another stream on the Jonan Show, and they're trying to build a website for people to submit questions. And so they have started a second stream of how they're developing this and pair programming and doing the development of how do we build this open source platform for people to ask questions for the other stream that they do every Wednesday. So it's very cool for sure. Awesome, awesome. Cool. So Erick, let's back up a little bit. Let's find out a little bit more about like how did you get into tech? Like how did you get into programming specifically? What was sort of your journey into this to find yourself as an Android developer? What sort of got you interested in pursuing this as a career and so on?
Yeah, actually, I am part of the fortunate few that since I was a teenager, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew it had to be computer related, and I had it clear that it was probably gonna be either programming or some sort of hardware engineer. Um, I'm a tinker at heart, and since I was a kid, I was already like either with Lego or some other um,
Awesome.
putting sticks together with strings, trying to do like a lift or to automate something. Like even since I was a kid, I wanted to automate being able to turn off the lights, like from my bed. So I had like this wire system that will actually use a little bit of weight to just enough to push the button. So I could just like pull a string and turn off the light. So since then, I knew that I wanted to be in the engineering side. Now, eventually I realized when I had to choose a particular career, there were a few options where one of them um, focused on having a little bit of knowledge of hardware, of software, but also automation for the industry. And that was very attractive to me. And I initially thought about taking it, but eventually I realized, and I want to go deeper into the computer space. And if my knowledge is more like uh, um, breadth or like uh, just a little bit of everything, I'm not going to be able to specialize on what I want to do. So that's when I
Gotcha.
started leaning into the development side. Um, Now, on the during my early career, I also realized, okay, there's so many. When you're a developer or a computer engineer, you have so many areas that you can focus on. Like there's engineers that specialize on databases, and that's what they do, and that's what you do your whole life, right? So you can pick a particular area, and you can go as deep as you want.
Hmm.
But in my case, there were several areas that were not as attractive to what I wanted to do. Um, so I started focusing my energy towards building tools that could transform and improve the lives of millions of people around the
Awesome.
world. And I found on mobile the opportunity to do so. I initially did some backend and implemented a few solutions, and that's great. But ultimately, I found on mobile, uh, which was a increasingly growing space at the time, to be the way I wanted to move forward.
Awesome. That's great. Cool, cool. Yeah, I love the idea of like sort of being the maker tinkerer. I've got like a whole bunch of 3D printers here. I got one like right behind me, and then I got like a whole workbench of them over here. And that was kind of, as a kid I played with a ton of Lego and stuff too, but now I build my own things. Get
Hmm.
like, a little Om Nom from the Cut the Rope game and stuff like that. So do all kinds of interesting things with 3D printing. I did a whole giveaway back in December with these really cool dragon models. Sent out like a dozen of those around the country, and a couple of them went to different countries too. I think two of them went up to Canada, two or three went up to Canada, and one of them went down somewhere down in Central America, I believe. So
Hmm.
yeah, um, cool. Jewel 4N, good to see you. First time in chat. What stack are you using at work? So when you talk about like Android development, are you doing like old school Java? Are you doing the more recent like Kotlin kind of work? Like what sort of technologies do you use at work? If you can talk about that.
Hmm. I can give a general idea.
Okay.
So, mm, without entering specific details of a specific projects or employers, what I can say is um, during my career, um, let's say 5 to 10 years ago, it was primarily Java, right? Android was Java based, and some people used the MVC pattern, and some people started migrating into MVP, right? And most of the old school tech stack was reusing some of the Android native solutions for multi-threading, right?
Hmm.
Async task and a little bit on the services side. But nowadays, I find that most um, projects have migrated out of Java and into Kotlin. And
Mm-hmm.
if they haven't completed the migration, it's very likely that it's going to be within their expectations that the project is ultimately going to be um, Kotlin based. And also,
Right.
some of the most common architectures that you're going to find on the market is going to be MVVM.
Yeah.
And Google did a great job with Android X. The, and with them, they provide you a few, like several libraries that you can reuse within your app development. But what I can say is, if you're very familiar with Jetpack and Android X and Kotlin, you're gonna have a successful career. Um, you don't but one important aspect that define the difference between junior, mid, and senior is, for example, when you're on the senior side, you also incorporate advanced topics and libraries, for example, for
Mm-hmm.
dependency injection. And because software or being able to automatically or automate the test of your code of your app is one of the primary
Right.
concerns of the higher of the um, bigger employers and bigger companies. um, their teams tend to be very large, let's say 20, 50 engineers. So you know, as a tech leader, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to review each single contribution to the code base, um, because it is not scalable, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes what you put in place are automated tools that go and review the code and look for code smells, that look if you set up certain rules for the coding standards, and they also automate reviewing against those rules. And also for the security aspect, some libraries and technologies help you identify areas that you should look at. They will not give you the solution, but they will raise an alert and say, hey, there's like this code that seems to be um, bringing some type of vulnerability or potential vulnerability. And that's when you step in as a lead engineer. And
Mm.
I will say your tech stack can vary quite a bit.
Yeah.
But as most of the projects you're going to find, as I said, Kotlin, MVVM, and some of the common networking solutions, or multi-threading solutions. So you're going to find for many
Mm.
projects, Rx Java or coroutines. You're going to find, for example, for image loading, you're going to find Picasso, um, or I believe Glide. There also I have seen somewhere in there. Um, what else? Um, for the testing side, you might find JUnit or Mock or Mockito.
Mm.
So those are like some common tools that you or libraries that you will find out there.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. So back to kind of the topic of interview prep. So a lot of folks that like to hang out on the stream are tend to be like they've gone to a boot camp or they just graduated from college, university. They're trying to get their first job in tech. And a question that I get on the stream quite a lot is how do I differentiate myself? How do I sort of stand out when I'm applying for a job? What sort of advice would you give like a brand new student? They're trying to get that first job or they're trying to get an internship. What advice do you typically coach people on, like, here's how to stand out or here's how to like get someone's attention?
Yes. The primary advice that I give any candidate aspiring for their first job, I will say, is have, since you don't have the previous history of employers that you can talk about, or since you don't have some um, uh, that aspect that kind of validates your knowledge, try to participate in an open source project. Try
Open source.
to, if you find that the entry barrier for big companies is too high, try to go with a startup. um, Try to, even if it's for a few months, I have seen that engineers tend to learn really quickly and gain experience in a rapid manner when they join a startup. So yes, you're gonna be staying up until midnight and burning the midnight oil and having a lot of coffee, but I will say it's worth it. So yes, the entry barrier is there, and as I say, have an alternative way of showcasing your work and be knowledgeable enough to talk about it and to demonstrate it. For example, having a GitHub and deploying open source projects or open source apps to GitHub also helps, because as an interviewer, you're trying to get as much information as you can to validate whether the candidate has the required knowledge that you need. And we cannot read the the mind of the candidate, right? We cannot know. Maybe the candidate did an amazing project where he used some of the technologies that we're looking for, but if
Yeah.
he doesn't say it or if he doesn't bring it up, we have no way of knowing, right? So make sure on your resume you have every single um, you have listed somewhere somehow every single library that you have used, um, every single technology you have worked on, if you also the architecture you have worked with, and even if you have some freelancing projects or if you have some open source projects that you have released, bring it up,
Mhm.
because otherwise if you don't bring them up, your resume is going to say graduated from this school, and I have no way of differentiating between someone that has some practical knowledge versus mainly theoretical.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I would caution on, like by listing something on your resume, it makes it fair game for me to ask you questions about it during an interview. So just
Mhm.
because you've used a particular library like once on a project, if you're not comfortable talking about that in an interview, I would recommend not putting it on your resume. You could still list it under the project, but I wouldn't list it as like a core skill. Because if I see that in your skill block, I'm probably going to ask you questions about it. But if you list it under a project later on, I may look at that and go, okay, well, maybe you just used that tool, but like not well enough to really speak to. If I start asking you questions about image processing or multi-threading or something like that, if that's not a core skill that you're able to speak to, I would be cautious about putting that on the resume.
That is
Um,
true.
yeah,
And anything that you put on your resume or that you mentioned during the interview, be prepared to answer questions about.
yeah,
So
for
if
sure.
you mention Kotlin, be expecting Kotlin specific questions
Mhm.
versus Java, right?
Right,
So
right.
if you're on the if you haven't fully experienced Kotlin and have used it just a couple times, mention it and be open about it.
Sure.
Sometimes you don't have to be an expert on the technology, but if you can, but sometimes you are able to say, well, I haven't used it as extensively, but I tinker with it here and there, and I'm willing to learn and further dig into it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And Jewel 4N actually had a follow-up question, which you just answered. Should I be too concerned about mastering every technology? No, absolutely. You
No,
don't have to
not
be
at
a
all.
master. We know you're an entry-level dev. We can see that by your experience. We can see it by your projects. We can see by when you finish school. We don't expect you to know all the things, and we don't expect you to be an expert in anything when you're coming in at that entry level. We hope that you have a good foundation of like programming and maybe testing and like general concepts, but we don't expect expertise. If you have expertise, that's going to like really sort of differentiate you and set you apart, but please don't stress and think you have to be a master at all the things. Otherwise you're going to be building up all kinds of experience, but you're not going to get paid for it because you're not going to have that job. Build enough projects to kind of get their attention, and then build up the experience on the job of like the depth of that experience. And Jessica West, good to see you in chat. Thanks for dropping by and thanks for the follow. So it's +1 to
Sorry,
interning at a
before we go
startup.
to the next question, I wanted
Yeah.
to add two points to that particular
Oh, sure. Yeah,
aspect.
yeah. Sure.
Um, the first one is one of my one some companies or some recruiters ask um, either on years of experience, or they say from 1 to 5, from 1 to 10, what is your level of expertise with a particular technology. And I believe that is one of the most challenging questions to answer,
For sure.
because most candidates don't go and say or ask what is a 1, what is a 3, what is a 5, right?
Yep.
So different companies have different ratings. So for me, a 5 would be maybe um, you are an expert in the library. You're able, if I were to give you the source code of the library, you might be able to make updates and changes, and also tell me um, what would be the reasons the architecture of that library was made in certain way, right?
Mhm.
Maybe for another person, a 1 to 5 could be maybe a 5 would be, hey, I know how to use the library. I don't need assessment or formal training with it, and I have some working knowledge with it, right?
Mhm.
And you don't need to be the owner or maintainer or creator
Right,
of the
right, right.
library, right? just have deep working knowledge. So ask every time that you get this question, ask, what would you consider a 1, a 3, a 5, or a 10, right?
Hmm. For sure.
But
For sure.
also, one other aspect I wanted to bring is, um, when you have a job requirement or job description, also, um, don't be, um, how can I say, don't be fearful if they say, for example, we need someone with 5 to 10 years of RX Java, because sometimes the person or recruiter that put that job description together doesn't even know if the library has been uh,
Right.
around for that long. There have been many instances where they say, oh, we want, I don't know, 15, 10, 5 years of experience with a particular library, right? And sometimes not even the creator meets that criteria, but
Right.
because he released the library, I don't know, 2 years ago, right?
Right.
So whenever you see these kind of discrepancies, bring it up, and don't
Hmm.
be fearful to say, hey, I have this experience. um, and don't fear to apply if there's a small discrepancy. You can even, nowadays we have access to Google, and we can actually see when was it released. And
Right.
if they say 10 years of experience for something that was released 2 years ago, you know you need to
Hmm.
bring it up and tell them. Right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's also a difference too. Like if I'm making a job post and I say I need 3 years experience in React, it's like, well, do you need 3 years of experience and you happen to know React, or are you looking for someone that's actually used React for 3 years? Because there's
Hmm.
a difference on those things for sure. And
There
so
is.
yeah, when in doubt, get clarification on it. Like get in touch with a recruiter, network with a hiring manager, and just say like, hey, I got some questions about this job description. I'm interested in the role. I'm interested in the company, but I've got a question about the wording on this. Like, can you clarify that?
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree with Eric. Like, don't be afraid to apply. Like, just go apply anyway, for sure.
Hmm. Let them decide.
Yeah,
Don't,
yeah.
just show who you are, as accurate as you can,
Hmm.
and be open to learn if there's something you don't know, and maybe you'll get hired even if you're missing a particular technology. I know many companies, and I myself have, um, let developers be hired, or hire developers even if they're missing some aspect or some library, because I
Right.
know if it's a strong developer and they have the willingness to learn, and a strong energy to, and passionate about it,
Absolutely.
they can work it out really quick.
You can teach technical skill. You can go learn technical skill. I think interviews need to be more about, is this the right person for the team? Are they going to get along with the team? Hire them for the potential of like, this is what they've done, this is what they could go learn. Especially for entry level devs, we need to focus more on their potential and like what they could learn and what they could go do than, oh, you don't have this one little aspect of what we put in this job post. And you're right, a lot of folks writing those job posts have no idea like what really goes into them. Most of them are not technical people that write
Mhm.
those job posts in the first place. So,
Yes, I
and
have seen.
yeah,
I have been reached out for positions or roles or technologies that are not even listed on my resume, and they say, and the recruiter sometimes has an automated message that says, "Oh, you're the perfect fit for this role," right? And I'm like, "Am I?"
yeah,
But also sometimes they send the wrong job description. So if, for example, you have been working with a recruiter and you were talking about being an Android developer, and suddenly they send backend
mm,
or iOS, tell them and say, hey, is there a typo? Like the you
yeah, yeah,
maybe the wrong, you attached something wrong. Is everything all right? And they say, and usually they come back and say, oh, my bad, I was like multitasking, and
right.
so even
Yep.
then clarify.
Yeah, for sure. Jewel4N asked a really good question in chat too. What about a self-taught path? That's kind of what they're doing right now. Is they're going through like, I'm teaching myself, maybe
Mhm.
following some like curriculum like Free Code Camp or something like that, but they're not actually going to a school to learn development. What sort of advice would you give someone who's going down the self-taught route?
Mhm. Um, that's one big challenge that hasn't been fully addressed within the industry. Um, Unfortunately, several employers, especially some of the bigger companies, um, tend to discard or not fully consider a candidate that that doesn't have a degree, right? And that is a challenge. Not every company is like this, but it does make the job search a little bit harder,
Hmm.
especially if you're transitioning from a different, let's say, career, or maybe You're trying to get your first job and you don't have the title, it becomes more difficult, and some companies will not consider you. But on the positive side, there has been a trend towards opening up the market and being more of a interview process where you're trying to identify the skills, and if you see the
Right.
skills, go ahead. And I believe in that, and I have been preaching and trying to open up the market on that aspect, because you don't need um, a 5 year degree to be able to do the job. What you do need is the practice, the passion, and the work ethic. And if you're able to showcase that, um, if the company policy allows me to do so, I will move forward with the candidate. Because on a daily basis, the candidate doesn't need to go, especially for programming and in certain areas of development, you're not going to need advanced physics, or you're not going to
For
need
sure.
ethics, or you're not going to need the, I don't know, the ability to. Sometimes the engineering, I see that there's like some sort of overhead. It's really good to have the knowledge. For example, I really appreciate having gone through computer science classes and engineering classes, and I enjoy quite a bit the physics and the math and the arithmetic. But I believe that 5 years might be too long for being prepared for the market. I think it should be shortened to 2 3 years, especially with the current shortage. And I
Yeah.
think it should be more focused towards programming and or what you're actually going to be doing.
Right.
Because the problem is sometimes the school programs are so complex or so long that they don't refresh as often. So they might be teaching you Java, right, for mobile, and we already are in Kotlin,
Right.
right? So as soon as you graduate, you might be obsolete, and
It's a good point. Yep.
that's one of the biggest challenges. Although I do, I am a believer in formal education as well, of any sort. It doesn't have to be formal college, but a boot camp can give you the skills. I do believe that someone that is an expert in the field or someone that has the knowledge can share you the knowledge that you need. And traditional schools will give you the environment to thrive. Most of
Mm.
them will try to create the environment for you to really learn the skills. So I still believe they're necessary, but I also don't believe you should go into thousands of dollars of debt to be able to be a good fit for a job. So
Mm.
there's a trade off that needs to be handled. And so that's what I like, these alternative approaches that some companies are following, that is more of a boot camp type of environment where you go
Right.
directly to learn what you need, and in a rapid phase being able to be deployed to the market. But unfortunately, many companies are still not considering that kind of education, so it's a challenge we need
Mm.
uh, to break. But there are companies that do take that into consideration, especially right now with the shortage of talent. Companies are expanding and be more and becoming more willing to work
Mm.
with the candidates on
Right.
that.
Yep. Jessica West makes a bunch of good points in the chat here. Just to kind of summarize a little bit, I like to talk about like what I'm looking for is how you talk about problems, how you learn, and then touching on like while you were talking, dropped a message that says some unfortunately some companies are still like this, where the recruiter and the hiring managers aren't really connected on what it is they're really looking for, and so you end up with that disconnect, and then the candidate is the one left hanging on that. And also says certifications are a good way to demonstrate understanding outside of a traditional degree. I agree.
Mhm.
I think Free Code Camp has a bunch, Udemy programs, Udacity programs if you can afford them. But you can typically find discount codes for all of those as well. But yeah, certifications are a big way to just if you don't have the formal education and you don't want to go like Eric said, you don't want to go into a huge amount of debt for like a boot camp or a university degree, especially because CS degree is expensive. Um, you can certainly go down a certification route and just learn on your own, get those certifications. I think a lot of it though, when you're applying for those jobs, it's going to come down like how do you sort of catch their attention, and that can be the kinds of projects that you work on. So if there are specific companies that you want to go work at, go find a project idea that's in line with what they do, or go mimic what they do as a company. Go write your own little project or website or whatever, and then submit that and say like, hey, I'm a developer. I built this project specifically because of your company. I really want to work there. This is what I built. This is why I'm sort of like headed in the same direction as what you do. This is why I'm really interested. And I think you'll at least get those phone calls. And then from there, it's up to you to prove that you've got the skill and the ambition and the ability to learn and all that kind of stuff. But it can start with like, do you just work on any project? Do you just and I think you need to be careful. It's not like, oh, just go do like another to-do list, tutorial. Like it's got to be a specific project. Like how did you actually solve a problem? Because the to-do list, that is a solved problem. Like everybody's got a to-do list.
Right.
But like go try to find something a little bit novel. Like I ran into a problem with, organizing my resumes. Although I'm starting to see like, or not resumes, recipes. I'm starting to see more and more projects now of like, oh, go find these recipes and set up a meal plan. Then it builds like an ingredient list of what to go buy at the grocery store. I'm starting to see a lot of those kind of crop up. And so that's almost feeling like the to-do list kind of project of like, okay, don't really need to build another one of those, but like find something novel in the world and or just if you can tell a good story about why you built a project and why that was important to you, what you learned from that project, that can really stand out to people. And it really comes down to on the resume and in those phone calls is really talking about this is what I bring to the team. Don't like Erick said, don't level yourself. Don't call yourself a junior. Don't talk about things you don't have as skills. Talk about what you do bring. And this is a project that I built. This is what I've been learning. This is how I'm continuing to learn. And just talk a lot about this is what I bring. This is what I bring. This is the skill that I have. And as we mentioned, a couple of minutes ago, you don't have to be a master. You don't have to know all the things, but what you do know, you need to have a good fundamental understanding of like programming concepts. And I think that that's going to get you through a lot of those initial phone calls into a technical challenge. And then from there, it's on you to prove like, okay, when you hear a problem, can you break that down into steps and then kind of go over that process that Erick mentioned earlier? So,
On top of that, I will add, um, there's a thriving startup community, thriving, and sometimes they don't either have the funding or the reach to be able to access top talent or um, certain types of roles. So I have found many startups that are willing to bring into their team a junior that can help them some way, somehow. Uh, Sometimes you think you have to have all the knowledge to do some meaningful contribution, but sometimes you can be just open and say, hey, I have these skills. With the startups, because there's no like formal structure most of the time, you can one day on a meetup, you could be talking to the owner or to the technical leader or engineering manager of the startup, right?
mhm,
And and most of them I have seen, when it comes to the startup environment, they try to be active within the community. So
right.
there's many meetups that they're going to be giving presentations, right? There's going to be some types of events when they want to reach out to the community and get some funding or to share their idea or to get more traction with the users. Feel
Mhm,
free to just go and talk to them and
right.
say who you are and say, hey, I'm interested in helping you, and I know even if you don't have the role, or even if you don't have the budget, or even if you're looking for a senior engineer, or I'm willing to help some way, somehow. And I'm willing to go the extra mile to make it work.
For sure.
And for example, let's say um, on my startup, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, I'm struggling to find a job, but I'm willing to work, and I'm open to help anyway, anyhow. The first thing I will do, I will be like, okay, see you on Monday. And if they show up Monday morning and they're willing to work, I most likely will assign them to something that they could do. For example, unit tests.
Right.
Um, you don't have to have production level code to participate into the development process. If you're on the junior level or you don't have production experience, most companies will be more than happy to have someone collaborate with the testing strategy. because if something goes wrong, it's a test, it's not production code. And if something goes right, you increase your code coverage, you increase your quality. So I don't be afraid to reach out to engineering managers or anyone hiring or recruiters and be open. Like, hey, even if I don't get to do like the full job description, I would love to help even with a subset if possible.
Mhm.
And there's several companies that have some sort of internship program, and you can learn a lot on the internship. Now, I do believe the internships should be paid, but unfortunately
Yeah.
some companies are not paid internships. But either way, if your end goal is to break into the IT field, there's many options, including those that we have already mentioned. So be
Yeah.
creative, be bold, just go out there and
Hmm.
show who you are, and network as much as possible, and ask, is anyone hiring? Do you have a friend or
Right.
someone that I can talk to? And you never know.
Yep, for sure. And one point that I made on the stream the other day, I think on Sunday, was that you're more likely to get a job through a second degree connection on LinkedIn than a first degree. It's about like, I know Eric. Who does Eric know that can get me a job? So reach out to your network and ask them, do you know anybody that's hiring? Handful of questions came in, and some of them are kind of long. So I do want to get through your questions. Appreciate that. Again, if you're watching on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can drop questions in those respective platforms, and I will answer those. But if you want your question to show up over here in this panel on Twitch, you'll actually have to come over to Twitch. So twitch.tv/Ian Douglas 736, same username that you would see on LinkedIn. So kind of going back a handful of questions here. Hitokiri, good to see you in chat. Um, Continually laugh at all the senior level uh, developer recruiters reaching out to me as an early career dev. Yeah, for sure. Most recently, someone said most of the people they hire only match 30 to 40% of the job post. Yep, absolutely. Dev Crash asks a personal question. I have a bunch of projects. I'm just going to summarize this one. I have a whole bunch of projects. Is it interesting to the hiring manager or recruiter if I put them on GitHub with dates? I think it could show the progression of my learning. Not sure if that's helpful or not. Jessica answered, like, I don't know if dates are necessarily required. I agree. But anytime you can highlight a project is great. As soon as you put them on GitHub, if they haven't already been part of a Git repo, they're not going to have dates anyway. And they're just going to show up kind of in the order that you put them on GitHub. I think having the code on GitHub is helpful. And if you don't already have them on GitHub and you want to put them on there to show that progression, I might actually put the date as part of like the repo name so that if they're just looking at a list of repos, they can at least see them by that name, especially if you put them in sorted order or something like that. Like do the oldest one first and then do the next more recent one and then the next more recent one so that the newest things always show up at the top. That way they can also kind of see that progression as well. So it could be helpful depending on how long it's been that you've been working on some of those.
Now,
Um,
one
yep,
thing I would like to add to that
sure.
is sometimes candidates think that there's going to be going through the resume, fully going through the repo and reading just the time. Sometimes occur that talking to you, just open up your resume and it's like reading it for the first time. So also you have to be very mindful on what do you highlight, because if you flood them with like 5 to 20 to more projects, they're not going to know which one to
Right.
pick. So imagine that whoever is reviewing your resources, whatever you provide, is going to have maybe um, 5 to a minute long span of attention into whatever you're providing. So
Yeah.
if you want to showcase multiple projects, do like a small summary with links and let them pick.
Yeah.
But don't think they're gonna go through your repo
Don't
and
put all
open
of
this
them on there.
project and this project. Like you might get maybe a couple minutes of someone looking at your repo, maybe. So be
Yep.
very mindful on what you publish.
And I always tell people, so Eric, the advice I typically give on the stream is go make a resume with all the things on it. But when you go apply for that job, trim out all the stuff that that company's not going to care about. It's way easier to trim that back down to like a page or a 2-page resume if you start with a really big one to begin with. And I actually put my own like really long resume together back in December when I was on the job hunt. I'm like, all right, let's do the thing. And I streamed for like 6 hours. About 4 hours of that was just me pulling in all this, background content about what I did at every single job. I had tons of bullet points, tons of projects, I've been in the industry for 26 years, so I got a lot of jobs. And then showing people like, watch how fast I can trim this back down to like a 1 or 2 page resume, and I could build a resume in like 3 minutes by making a copy and just deleting just tons of stuff that a particular company's not going to care about.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got 20 projects, that's all fine and good. Tell me like the two that are most important to me and my company. Those are the things that are going to stand out to me, as opposed to these are the two projects that I'm most proud of. Well, that's fine, but if you're like a mobile game developer and I'm an insurance company, I don't care about your mobile game because that's not what we do. Show me
Mm-hmm.
something that's more in line with like customer data input or something, some sort of visualization tool or like a dashboard of some kind. That's going to be way more intriguing to an insurance company than a mobile game company. But that would also beg the question of, do you want to go work for an insurance company if you want to get into mobile gaming? If that's something you care about, why aren't you applying for those jobs? So,
Mm-hmm. Well, the
um,
mobile gaming
yeah.
is very challenging. Like any kind of gaming company, there's going to be many people trying to get in,
Mhm.
and it's going to be long work hours. And since you release once, you create a game, and then you release it in a rapid manner, you're going to end up like maybe burn out really quickly. So
Yeah,
also,
for sure.
whoever is trying to go into the gaming aspect of the field, of the programming field, try to talk to a game developer first,
Yeah,
because you might enjoy playing the games, but you might not necessarily enjoy the environment or the highly competitive field.
yeah,
um, on top of that, I wanted to add something else. Oh
sure.
yes, alternative ways of showcasing your experience, or your on either your resume or as part of the the interview.
Mhm.
If you can, if you're knowledgeable about, let's say, Kotlin, or coroutines, or Java, or a particular library, try to look for an environment, or for example a meetup group, to give a to give a talk about it. So
Absolutely.
there's many, there's hundreds of groups around the world that are looking for speakers about basics of a particular language or library.
Mhm.
And a lot of people I have seen, they're adamant because they say, well, I don't know the library like in full detail. I used it, I know these things, but I'm not like the creator. And you don't need to be the creator, you just have to put together maybe a workshop where you showcase a subset of what does it do. You sometimes people just need, with Kotlin, maybe you can show, have a workshop, or a presentation on what is the difference between Kotlin and Java, and why you like Kotlin, or maybe just the basics, and here's a hello world, right? So being able to also, that's one of the ways you can be creative to differentiate yourself from other candidates.
Yep, for sure. And you don't have to be an expert to go give a lightning talk at a meetup. Just go say like, this was my experience in learning X, like whatever that subject is. You don't have to be an expert at it. Like I said, or like Eric said, there are enough meetups that are looking for people to give a talk. Like they almost don't even, well, I mean, they care what your topic is, but you don't have to be an expert. And if you just get up and be like, hey, I'm new as a developer, and this is just my experience working with such and such a library, great, give that talk. No one can argue with experience. But if
Mhm.
you get up and you say, this is how to use this library, you're going to get a ton of people telling you why you're wrong. And so I think you can kind of frame it a little bit with like, here's my experience and just present it that way. I think it's fine.
Mhm.
DevCrush kind of followed up on the question about GitHub. Like, I also have a personal website. Would it be more interesting to just put everything over there and not do GitHub? I think having it on GitHub is helpful just to show how to use GitHub.
Mhm.
I think that could be helpful. So get the projects on there. I think it makes it easier to find you and the kinds of things that you've done. I would absolutely put your projects on GitHub. Maybe pin, depending on the companies where you're going to go apply, maybe pin like 3 or 4 projects that are going to be the most relevant to a number of companies, or just the ones that you're most proud of. But when you put them on a resume, make sure that you're only presenting the projects on the resume that are actually important to that company, and don't list all of them. Don't try to list all of them. Um, and then DevCrush said, I mentioned on the other stream, does anyone care about your activities on Stack Overflow? So some of the jobs that I've recently applied for, yeah, I showed them like, here's my link to Stack Overflow, here's my link on Quora. because it's a developer relations kind of tool where they want to see how you interact in a public forum. Are you respectful? What kind of language do you use? How helpful are you? Or are you just like, this question is garbage? Like what kinds of comments do you leave? Like they want to see your mannerism. I've
Mhm.
actually sent that out for those kinds of jobs. As a developer, they might be interested. I mean, that's the kind of thing where I would put it on the resume if you think it's going to be important for what you're doing in that company at that role. Like if there's any sort of customer facing aspect, then yeah, I would maybe put that on there somehow if you've got room for it. But if it's not, if you don't think it's relevant for that job, I would say don't leave it on the resume. If it's not super relevant to the role, not super relevant to the company, it's just taking up space that you can use for other more important things. That would be my thought. Any thoughts on that, Eric?
Yes. I think it would be a nice to have or a bonus on my experience and what I have seen in the market, at least for mobile development, is not like a requirement. But if I see it as a recruiter or as an interviewer, I would be curious to be if I see it in the resume and I see, oh, you have your Stack Overflow handle, I
Mm,
will be like, hey, like tell me, do you um, answer questions or how do you collaborate in Stack Overflow? And I wouldn't go too deep into it, but
right.
I would love to hear someone that goes and says, yes, I love to share my knowledge or to help
Right.
other people. And
Absolutely.
sometimes I get questions about Android or Kotlin or backend, or maybe someone have a particular piece of code and I was able to debug it and provide a solution of why wasn't it working. And I will appreciate that. It will show me more of on the side of soft skills
Hmm.
instead of the technical skills.
For sure. For sure. Yep. And Jessica followed up as well saying GitHub's UI is getting better to highlight certain projects. You can spend time working on that a bit. Could help with the lift of adding things to your portfolio, but do one task at a time. Yeah, don't try to do all the things all at one time. Uh, Otherwise you'll burn out for sure. Like and that's something that we've talked about on the stream too, of like how do you juggle, company research and studying and getting ready and practicing like leak code for technical challenges and working on projects and applying for jobs and actually doing interviews. Like how do you juggle that? Eric, any advice on like how to sort of like divvy up your time a little bit, or like what sort of time management tips and tricks can you share?
Yes, I believe on my early career, sometimes you don't know where to start, and I think that's also a critical aspect. Being able to generate or have an idea on how the road looks like, on what are the topics that are going to be covered, what are the skills that you need to work on. So I have found in certain books a very formal and thorough um, explanation about the technical interview process, and I have found to be vital to share with you like how to get started. So I think there's many books, and I don't know if I'm allowed to mention them here.
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm totally cool with that. Yeah, absolutely.
So I believe, even though it's a very common book, I do believe it's very valuable. Cracking the Coding Interview
Hmm.
is the name of the book.
Yep.
I forgot the author, unfortunately, but if you look it up, there's going to be many editions and variants on it. But just like that, there's books that will help you in every single section of the interview process. Like, from what do I study? What topics should I cover? What happens when I have the interview? What happens when I get an offer? Because sometimes we focus so much on um, having a good performance on the interview that not all candidates have the experience of actually negotiating in the offer, or making sure that they're getting what they need or they want.
Right.
So that's also a critical aspect of the process, where once you do the technical aspect, what comes next, right? And these books tend to cover everything, and they tell you Microsoft does this, Google does this, these are the topics they care about, um, and that is very helpful.
For
Other
sure.
than that, if you are able to get a mentor, that someone willing, that with experience to give you some feedback or help you along the process, that is even better. but
Yep.
also within your friends. There's many communities out there of developers or aspiring developers that want to learn on how to get that first job. And if you join those communities, you'll see that you're not alone, and possibly one of them has already gone through what you have and probably has the answer that you're looking for.
For sure.
So you mentioned, and I also am passionate about it, free coding bootcamp. There's
Hmm.
usually one group in every state, and they also have online resources that are very thorough. And as I said, there's many organizations that are trying to bring more developers into the community. So feel
Hmm.
free and try to network as much as you can. Go to
Yep.
meetups, join groups, and they will guide you in the point direction.
Yep.
So that's what I was.
And they're called meetups, not show ups. You got to go there to actually meet people. Like they're meant to be networking events. You can't just show up and like attend and be a consumer. You got to participate. You got to like actually meet people. And
Yeah, ask questions.
Eric brought up a
Hmm.
good point about cracking the coding interview too. It's a big book. It's like I think the last edition was something like 700 pages. I would say make sure you get a recent copy because yes, it does go into like this is what Microsoft looks at, this is what Google looks at, but that changes all the time. And so if you get a really old copy of the book, you want to make sure that you're at least getting the modern equivalent of like the kinds of things that they're looking for in their interview processes and so on. But yeah,
Hmm.
it is a good book, and it's written by Gail Lackman McDowell. And I think she's also got a bunch of YouTube videos as well where she'll actually talk like, here's the process I follow when I hear a problem. Like this is how I'm going to sort of discuss it. And the most recent one I watched of hers was like rotating a matrix 90 degrees, like the process that she would go through. Like, okay, well, this is how I think about like do an outer ring and then do an inner ring and then do an inner ring until like there's nothing left to do, and just kind of like dividing it in half and then like figuring out how to rotate things around. But she talks through like this is the process I follow and this is how I'm going to like explain what I do. So very similar to what Eric was saying. Make sure you understand the inputs and the outputs. Make sure that you talk about the process. Make sure you talk about why you're doing it the way that you are. You and especially for an entry level dev, sometimes that's enough. Like it's just your communication and your process. Sometimes that's enough. Some
Hmm.
companies they want to see like yeah you can complete it, and it's also like really amazing code. Some companies are more flexible on it. So it really comes down to the company and what their process is, and some of that you can learn by networking. But it does feel very daunting for sure, especially if you're in a hurry to get a job. So yeah,
Hmm.
lots of things to consider there.
Now, touching a little bit on time management.
Mhm.
But first of all, also, there's great, amazing resources on YouTube. So they will explain you every single topic. Sometimes they will give you a general overview of the interview process. Sometimes they will talk about the interview process of a particular company. Sometimes they will talk about algorithms, and sometimes they will talk about particular problems. Now, coming back to the time management, I will say in general, if you're trying to land a job as fast as possible, first of all, um, as I said, identify with any of the resources we have previously mentioned what what does the process look like from I got a phone call. No, actually, it begins even before. It starts with I'm posting my resume, I'm preparing my resume, I'm preparing my GitHub. That's like in the initial stages. You're preparing a portfolio and some documents that say who you are and what your experience, like how can you contribute to the company. So once you get those correctly, you can post them on multiple platforms, being the one that at least I personally had the most success being LinkedIn. Um, make sure it's up to date, and that you have all the keywords and project description, and then make sure that you're able to, when you get a phone call of a recruiter, make sure that you're able to talk to them in a matter of, let's say, 30 seconds on a general idea of who you are and what your experience. And so that's called elevator pitch. So make sure to prepare an elevator pitch of anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute of your experience. And you're going to miss a lot of details, and that's fine.
For sure.
As maybe you heard on the initial conversation that we had, I introduced myself with a little bit of my early experience and a little bit on the recent stuff. And I try to take less than a minute possible. And even though I have experience with multiple projects, but just the gist is what you need to do. Other than that, once you have laid out or understood what the process on a high level looks like, you start going through each of the steps. Now, um, I will say a personal goal that will be very helpful to any candidate trying to land a job as soon as possible is to have a goal of I'm gonna solve a programming challenge every day. So there's lead code, there's hacker rank, there's many other where you can find
Hmm.
different difficulties. It could be from easy to medium to hard, and it doesn't matter if it's just the easy one. Uh, Put as a goal on your calendar, on your to-do list, wherever you keep track of your daily activities. Put it as a goal. I'm gonna code and solve a problem every day, no matter the difficulty.
Yep, that's great. I've got a YouTube video that I'm going to share. I'll just drop my general YouTube link in chat here. But there's also let me find my channel. I actually made some YouTube videos specifically about leak code and how to like kind of reduce the grind a little bit, but also how to kind of reverse engineer other people's answers to work
Mhm.
towards like pseudocode and really get into the mind space of how do I solve this kind of problem. So I'm just going to go look those up real quick, and then I will drop that in the chat as well if you're curious. And so if you click on this link, you'll see the top two videos are like how to reduce the leak code grind and then reverse engineering the solutions into other things. It's about 3 hours of total content. You don't have to watch the whole thing. You'll get kind of the gist of it as you go because I do walk through several examples in those videos, but something to think about there. Eric, speaking of time management, we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes, and I do want to respect your time. I appreciate that you're willing to hang out with us. I typically like to end my stream with guests where I ask a ton of silly questions, and they're meant to be kind of rapid fire. Like don't spend a lot of time thinking about them. They're just meant to be like kind of funny, sort of like what's the best Wi-Fi name that you've seen, stuff like that.
All right. Um, I'll oh, FBI ban.
FBI surveillance van number 19. Yeah, I've seen that around my neighborhood.
Or some
Um,
emojis that they do with text. I love those.
yep, for sure. How do you feel about pineapple on pizza?
I love it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I even add anchovies.
All right, all right, all right. Um, let's see. Some of these I have to be careful asking because they're not really safe for work. In it's like what body part do you wish you could detach and why? But I think we'll skip that one.
Well, I can say my
All
hands,
right,
so I can program when I'm doing something else or
sure,
walking
that's
around.
fair. That's fair. In one sentence, how would you sum up the internet?
In one sentence. Wonderful yet dangerous.
All right. What movie would be greatly improved if it was made into a musical?
Oh wow. Oh my god. I don't know if I can rapid fire that one. Um, I would love to see a sci-fi movie being made into a musical.
Like the Matrix musical or something? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be great. Neo and the effects and the bullets flying around. I don't know, and
Yep.
maybe having Neo saying what they're fighting. Yeah, actually,
Sure,
that's a
sure.
good.
If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you had done?
Oh my god.
For me, they'd probably think I like hacked something.
Yeah, driving too slow. I think that would be the one. Sometimes
Driving too
I'm
slow?
just enjoying the mountains, enjoying the the sunset, and I tend to drive. Sometimes I
Fair,
drive too
fair.
slow.
What's something really popular right now, but in 5 years everybody's going to look back on and be embarrassed?
Oh my god.
NFTs.
Probably, yeah, probably the what was it called? The Japanese series that everyone's watching right now. I loved it, by the way. The
Oh,
one that
Squid
everyone
Game.
Squid Games. Yeah,
Yeah, the Korean one. Yeah,
I loved it. And it's
that was a
widely
really
different.
interesting. Yeah, I'm curious what season two is going to be like. Um, let's see. Pick a good one to end on here.
Oh wait, I want to add something.
Yeah, sure.
Computers with no ports. I think some we should be ashamed of that. And I
Really?
love what they did by bringing back the ports, like the
Yeah.
dongle mess. Unless we have very good wireless technologies, we should still have ports. And wireless is unreliable, no matter if it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or
Sure.
there's always going to be some sort of issue.
All
and
right.
sometimes those two devices to pair with each other is horrible. So
That's
sometimes
very
I
true.
just put the 5 millimeter jack and put on the headphones, and I listen on the laptop. And if I want to go to my phone, I'll change it to my phone, and there's no pairing or clicking or anything.
True.
I just plug
True.
it up, and then so yeah.
All right. We'll end with this one. We're gonna transport you into the past 400 years. You're not taking anything with you. And assume you show up in like period era clothing. How do you prove that you're from the future?
uh, Having something persist, any kind of message persist for that long, is going to require um, some sort of craftsmanship. So
Mhm.
I will have to put maybe on a cavern some type of a of mm, with I mean there's no stone and there's no like chisel, but I will have to grab something to do an engraving on a wall. And I think I will have to talk about maybe um, the space, maybe about, I don't know, airplanes, or maybe do some sort of wonderful structure. Maybe the part we don't know. Maybe the
Yeah.
pyramids are some sort of showcasing some sort of higher intelligence or ancient civilization, right?
You never know. You
So
never know.
I will have to build something or that is like really big, that is impossible to make with the current technology or with the current knowledge,
That'd
or
be a great
just
way to do it.
something really nice on a wall.
Yeah, imagine having to imagine having to explain TikTok or something like 400 years in the past.
Yeah.
Jessica actually dropped it in chat. That's probably the one thing that people will be most embarrassed by in 5 years. Last question that actually came from chat. Someone asking if you're on Twitter. I've been dropping your LinkedIn link in the Twitch chat, and of course people will be able to find you on the LinkedIn video afterwards. But for those watching on YouTube afterwards, by the way, like and subscribe. Are there other places that people can find you online?
Yes. Uh, as a host of Denver Droids, you can find me on meetup.com. I'm the host of Denver Droids. It's a group that we share um, many workshops or presentations on how to work with Kotlin, with Android, or get better at the interview process. So meetup.com, Denver Droids. Also, mm, LinkedIn is one of the places that I tend to connect and network.
Mhm.
But also, let's see. Um, I'm starting a YouTube channel as part of Denver Droids. So
Cool.
eventually, if you look Denver Droids in YouTube, you should be able to find some of the resources that either myself or some of the engineers in my network have created to share with the community.
Awesome.
I'm not very active on Twitter, um, but maybe in the future.
Yeah.
But for
Awesome.
now, those are like email. That
Mhm.
also, anyone just feel free to shoot me an email. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'll give you my personal details and we can chat. Um,
Awesome. Cool. I will drop your LinkedIn profile again one more time as soon as I find that page. Got way too many browser windows open. There we are. I will drop Erick's LinkedIn one more time. Of course, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, you'll see that as part of the event. But I will also drop it on the Facebook live feed for anyone watching on Facebook. Erick, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate kind of hearing your thoughts and your perspectives, hearing about your journey into tech, but also as an interviewer, giving a lot of career advice. I love having people on the stream that have slightly different takes, slightly different perspectives on things, but we're also really aligned on how to prepare for interviews and the kinds of things to take into account. So yeah, really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, any last closing comments that you want to share?
yes, anyone that is passionate about sharing their knowledge, no matter if um, they are more on they have never given a workshop or a presentation, um, please reach out to me, and I'll give you a spot on as part of the Denver Droids group, and I will
Awesome.
collaborate with you on preparing for the presentation. So if you're looking for a job and you want to showcase your expertise or at least experience on a particular topic, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll help with I will help you set up for success.
That's
And
fantastic.
many companies love it. So
That's great.
just reach out to me. And if you have any questions, just send me a message on LinkedIn. I can help you with many areas on the how can I say interview process, and I will be more
Great.
than happy to help. That's one of the things
Awesome.
that I get up in the morning, and one of the things that I'm passionate about doing is just how can I help the world or a person be better uh, uh, with with my abilities. How can I make the world a better place, even if it's a small contribution at a time?
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks very much. I think with that, we'll wrap up. Erick, again, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Hang out on the stream on that other interface for a second. We'll kind of close down. Everyone else, thanks for hanging out tonight. Let me go see if there's anybody online that we can go raid. If you got a raid suggestion here on Twitch, let me know. Let's see who's streaming online right now. Finite Singularity's online. And Chris Perillo's still online. Chris has rated me in the past. I should probably rate him back. But Finite Singularity, let's see. Working on skiing telemetry overlays for a skiing stream in Angular and Django. That sounds like a good one. So yeah, I think we'll go raid Finite Singularity. And so we'll get that set up, and we'll see everybody over on that stream in a little bit. Thanks so much for everyone. Yeah, Creature Next, thanks for showing up. We're just wrapping up for the night, but you can catch this on YouTube in a little while. But appreciate everybody coming by. Thanks for the chat. Great questions tonight. Keep bringing those questions every week. Sunday is just going to be Q&A. And then next Thursday, I've got Mike Chen, who streams on Twitch as well. I'm going to have Mike Chen. The week after that, I've got a recruiter from San Diego named Alex. The week after that, I'm going to be doing a panel interview. There's going to be several of us nerding out on why hiring junior devs is such a there's children in the room. Why it is such a show, and why it's so hard to get a job as a junior dev. A bunch of us are going to kind of collaborate and talk about like how can we make that better, and what can we start doing within the community to poke at companies and say like, hey, you need to do better about this. So tune in for that. That'll be February 3rd. But yeah, every Thursday for the next several weeks. Someone actually asked earlier in chat, can I get like a calendar of guests? And I am going to be working on that over the next couple of days. I will get that up this weekend. So when you check out techinterview.guide/streaming, it'll be a calendar of events, as well as like linking to the channels for like LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to move the resume review page somewhere else. So again, Erick, thanks. Hang out for a minute, and we'll get this raid set up. Get
All
everybody
right,
over
thank
to
you, Alan.
raid Finance Singularity, and we'll see everybody over there in a little bit. And have a good night, everyone. We'll see you on Sunday.